We'd like to begin our introduction to the Science and Spirituality section of our website by sharing two perspectives from scientists who see no separation between science and spirituality. The first perspective comes from science writer and author of The Divine Matrix, Greg Braden. By relaxing the boundaries that have traditionally kept science and religion separate, we believe we'll ultimately find the power of a greater wisdom through the dance between science and spirituality. Cutting-edge scientific discoveries are hinting that consciousness may very well be the ground of all being, since it affects everything from our cells of our bodies to the atoms of the universe. What is exciting is that it has become the place where science, faith, and spirituality seem to be finding common ground.
The next quote comes from quantum physicist John Bell. He says, "Suppose that quantum physics were found to resist precise formulation after all. Suppose further that when precise measurement beyond all practical purposes is attempted, we find an unmovable finger obstinately pointing outside the subject to the mind of the observer, to the Hindu scriptures, to God, or even only to gravitation. Would that not be very, very interesting?" We firmly believe that the Cartesian dualism championed by Descartes in the 1600s originated principally to allow science to pursue science without the need for theological pruning. The unfortunate belief that there is separation between science and religion has put a damper on scientific thought and religious growth. Consequently, both science and religion have suffered and continue to need a substantial amount of triage.
Unfortunately, the narrow-minded nihilism of traditional science and the arrogant divisiveness of dogmatic religion have kept underlying universal truths hidden and have pushed us toward division and separation. Dogmatic rigidity from the religious side and narrow world views from old scientific perspectives are handcuffs that perpetuate error and deny our oneness with the universe and one another. While scientific orthodoxy boasts no visible seminaries or churches or preachers or dogma per se, it is nevertheless a faith-based, dogmatically opinionated scientific community.
Its sacred religious cows are rigidity, skepticism, and research-funding servitude. Bernard Hayes, astrophysicist and author of The God Theory, describes this orthodoxy perfectly. He says, "Religious and scientific skeptics who scoff loudest at all things spiritual hold professional gatherings that bear an ironic resemblance to revival meetings, at which they pump up the faithful to go forth and combat anything that smacks of 21st century science."
Fortunately, there are a growing number of scientists from the fields of quantum physics, neuropsychology, neurotheology, astrophysics, and parapsychology who are collaborating with metaphysicians, mystics, and spiritual leaders throughout the world to pull us out of the Dark Ages. In truth, science and spirituality have always been soulmates. Bold thinkers throughout the history of humankind have seen no separation whatsoever between science and spirituality.
We owe these Renaissance thinkers a huge debt of gratitude for keeping the alignment between science and spirituality close enough so that the integrity of their indivisible relationship can be maintained. Bringing spiritual insights into a material consciousness is a hero's journey. Keeping science and spirituality separate is a coward's way out, a cop-out for those who want to keep humankind in the Dark Ages. Physicists Rosenblum and Kuttner add their more than 2 cents worth to the illogical separation between science and spirituality. They say, "The encounter of physics with consciousness has troubled traditional physicists since the inception of the theory decades ago. Our own feelings," say Rosenblum and Kuttner, "accord with Schrodinger's. The urge to find a way out of the impasse ought not to be dampened by the fear of incurring the traditionalists' mockery."
Now, I've got to tell you that we would expand Rosenblum's and Kuttner's insights and those of Schrodinger's by saying that 21st century science is telling the traditional religious community something about the nature of the universe, and religious institutions ought to listen, or chance becoming totally irrelevant. The good news is there is a strong feeling among a growing number of enlightened scientists and those in forward-thinking spiritual and religious communities that the subjects of cosmology, God, consciousness, and universal oneness on the one hand, and quantum physics and the neurosciences on the other, are coming together to provide a unified description of the universe that sees consciousness as the unified field.
We'd like to share a few of the observations that surface when we take an enlightened look at the absolute compatibility between science and spirituality. Consciousness is the ground of all being. There is an underlying consciousness that underwrites, connects, unites, harmonizes, permeates all things, visible and invisible. Cells, molecules, and atoms are conscious entities. Everyone and everything is connected by a universal web of consciousness.
Traditional science and dogmatic religion have gone beyond their empirical and biblical relevance, respectively. The observable universe is God, the one reality, the infinite beingness, the eternal presence in physicality.
There is only one power and one presence, the beingness we call God. We are that one presence expressing as the Christ at the point of us.
We are the residents of one of the billions of universes that make up the multiverse. We are convinced that science and spirituality are merely two symbiotic frames of reference which seek to understand our place in physicality and physicality's place in the eternal beingness we call God. We firmly believe humankind's enlightenment will come when we see science and spirituality as two complementary and compatible sides of the same cosmic coin.